Cool. So our first talk is from Jacqueline, and it will be about working together for better digital products.
Oh, hi everyone. Can you hear me? All good?
I can hear you, Maya. How are you
Uh,
doing?
I'm really good. And you can
Awesome.
see my screen properly. All good?
Yes, we can see your
Because
screen.
there's
Yes.
nothing worse than like talking and people going like, Jackson can't hear what you're saying. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about some stuff. So I don't always know if it's advisable to listen to the thing that I talk about, but I have done this for a long time. So maybe in amongst all of this, there's some interesting things. So the first thing is I want to talk about working together for better digital products. But I took this past my pet UX writer last night, and he thought that the message that I have in my talk is actually better. Like it doesn't describe this properly, and he also thought this line was weak. So I updated it, and he said that we should rather call it "Making Friends for Money." So what we are like, the theme is still the same. It's about collaboration, but the main thing that I want us to kind of start talking about is that often when I start working in technology teams over the years, over many years in my career, I often hear people say, we don't care what users say or think. And what I hear in my head as a human-centered designer with a lot of strategy and like kind of making sure that we make money through the products that we make, I hear, we don't care about getting paid. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about like money with the design and the development community, because for me, that's the one thing that I wish people would think a little bit more about, because sometimes, you know, you come up with a specific idea and you share it, and people think that you're doing it for some uh, like imaginary reason. And if we kind of pull it back to business strategy and why we are all here, then it's kind of easier to kind of understand why we're doing this work. So the first part for me is that I don't know if you know this, but there's this thing called a profit and loss statement. And somewhere in your business, they are having a conversation about the P&L. And all the product engineering and the design teams are on the loss part of that statement because we provide a service to the business, and only through our work does the business make money. So why is this important? This affects how the business decides how many people you can have in your team, how many people you can hire, and like what cool stuff you can actually be making. So that's kind of why, even if you don't really care about human-centered design, we should be caring about our customers, because that's how the business makes money. And they kind of fund us to do the things that we love to do. So my first tip is care more about the money. So I want to kind of talk about saving money. And one of the ways that we do that is we should be more efficient by understanding how we can make customers as happy as quickly as possible. So there's this very smart man called Jesse James Garrett. And every time anyone asks me for any reading that they should do, I still recommend this book, even though it was like written in 2002. But let's quickly talk through it. So he talks about the 5 S's. The bottom layer is strategy. So strategy looks at user needs and site objectives. That's still kind of old language. These days, we would just talk about the system objectives or how the business is trying to make money. And this bit in the middle is that if you think about all the people in the world, and this is the thing that you are making for your business, that bit in the middle that intersects in the Venn diagram, that is your customer market fit. So those are the people that will be using your system. And those are the people that most of us should be caring about. The second part is the scope part. That's where you do functional specification and content requirements. Functional specification is what do people want to do on your system. So if I think about some of the like when I worked in banking, I worked in the transactional banking space. So setting up beneficiaries, paying someone, that's kind of what I mean. So what things are you trying to do? And then you also get like what content do they expect? So when we talk about content, we sometimes think that we're talking about like kind of, you know, newspapers or something, but it could also just be that someone expects to see a review on a page to give them the confidence to buy the product. The next layer is the structure layer. The structure layer is the interaction and information architecture. Interaction design, I just want to pause at. So that's one of the areas that I hear a lot of misunderstanding about these days, where people think it's animation. Interaction design is actually comes from the 70s. So it's human-computer interaction and human factors. So what it looks at is how humans interact with technology. So basically the top layer is always the people. So what do people try and do in your system? The middle layer is how the technology works. So the flow. So how does what happens on the glass for your customer or the person using it to kind of get through their task. And the bottom layer is that technology working up. So that's kind of the space I love working in. And that's why I'm always so comfortable working with both engineers and designers, probably because I've been both. Then we get to the skeleton layer. And this is where people often think this is where UX happens. This is where the wireframe happens. So if you work in a team as an engineer or as a designer and you only see wireframes, you should start getting a little bit worried. And we should start like kind of having conversations to at least understand why the business is trying to get us to do stuff, because that just kind of helps give meaning and making sure that the work that we do will be used, which I think is really important for any of us who focus on craft. Then the top layer is the surface layer, so that is the visual design. So often when people talk about all of this, I kind of talk only about visual design. And that's the big thing that they think there's an overlap. Something I wanted to kind of look at here is task orientation versus information orientation. So that's kind of how this diagram also hangs together. And with that, I just kind of wanted to give you this context of like, this is how the process can hang together. So where are the screens? Like when I hear that, I like always get a little bit concerned, because it means that we work in a business that only focuses on the visual output and doesn't really pay that much attention on why people are using the system and why we are making the things that we are making. So I want to kind of then overlay what I've just shown you on a kind of software process. So the double diamond, are we making the right things? So that is where product and design generally go and find out what customers want. That's about product market fit. So either if it's a startup or if you're spinning up like a new division, like you would kind of spend time on that. Personally, this is where I try to make sure that when I do a conceptual design, I make sure that at least at this one point, the engineering team or someone from the engineering team, at least one person, should be seeing the work that we're doing. So we kind of do stuff like problem definition. In my view, technical architecture should be involved here. It's a little bit difficult to talk about the technical integration because that's more dependent on the type of work that you do. What I'm trying to point out is that the technical and like capability should be part of this process, even if it's just informed and consulted. But your tech lead should probably be in these sessions as well. What we'll build, that is kind of where we go. This is what the business wants to make money. This is what customers want so that we can make money for the business. And we kind of hang out with the engineering team to make sure that we can actually make something, right? So what are we able to make? Then that's all the other stuff. I also just wanted to do like a little bit of an overlap there at the bottom. So the purple bit is the product capability, the pinkish bit is the design capability, the blue bit is the engineering capability. Now, even if we just look at this visualization, we actually see there's very little overlap between the different capabilities. So it shouldn't be that surprising to us that it often seems that there is conflict or misunderstanding between the capabilities because we only really touch together on these different points. And very often, most people are involved only at the releases. And I mean, when you're in a project where the releases have, like the release cycle has been really bad, like that's where there's a lot of tension. So it's no wonder that it often feels like there's a lot of tension between the different team members. And that's true if this is the only way that you ever interact with each other. So kind of the main thing that I wanted to illustrate all the things I've been saying is imagine we've got this like whole diagram of when you start a product, you have one person, the product person, trying to figure out what the business wants. Then you get two people, the design lead and the product person, figure out product market fit. They figure out whether it's the right product. Next, you get some sort of technical involvement so that we can figure out like what we want to make. That also depends on the project, right? On what, if it's software as a service or whatever, when you get get involved from a technical perspective kind of differs there. Then POs start getting involved. We get the design team, more involvement from a technical back-end integration. That's where the whole team kind of does the work, where the release happens. So if we start mapping a cost to this, let's assume everyone makes the same amount of money. Let's say you start out with one person, that's your cost for a certain amount of time. And you see how the cost kind of just goes all the way up the more people are involved. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that if we are doing work from an engineering and a design perspective, where we are doing half-baked thought or half thought out reasons for doing the work, we don't really know if it'll work. We are actually costing the business more money. So having cheap ways of prototyping ideas, like not spending that much time and money on making sure what we should be making, and then really spending a lot of time on getting the craft and the detail of the work right. That is what I think, and that is what I believe most teams should be doing from an efficiency perspective. So this kind of talks to how we save money by ensuring a good process. So in this case, we are looking at efficiency to delivering the right software for our customers. The other two things that we look at is saving and making money, right? So saving money usually looks to the employee experience. So how do we reduce customer contact? So like we don't want too many people like phoning the contact center. Sorry, the triple C. Making money, that's where you kind of look at your KPIs and you look at revenue and you look like AOV, depending on what space. I've been working at Superbliss, so I've been spending a lot of time with the KPIs on ecom. So that's kind of a big thing for us. Okay, cool. There. So the next thing that is super, super, super important to me, that's the money bit, is for me, it's really important to have a good team. So I'm going to try and swap to this. And I don't know if you'll be able to hear this. Actually, I have no idea if you'll be able to hear this. If you can't hear this, can someone please tell me?
Hey, Jacqueline.
Yeah?
Can't hear it.
Okay, cool.
You can try the share video if you want to.
Oh no, that sounds complicated. What if I mess it up? Anyway, I'll give you a quick overview. Be like Mr. Renham. in this clip, the IT team goes to the head of the business, Mr. Renham, to complain about Jen because she doesn't actually know anything about IT. And then the phone rings and someone phones to say, oh, this particular team didn't know how to work together. And then Mr. Renham goes, if you can't work together as a team, you're all fired. And as he's trying to fire them, they don't know how to like get rid of everyone. Then he phones the security team and he's like, if you can't work together as a whole team, I'm going to fire the whole team. So for me, I really believe that people should work together as a team. So when people talk about the difference in or conflict or like how people feel about the different capabilities in a team, I'm like, we should be working together for a better outcome together. We shouldn't be like seeing ourselves as like opposites. So it's all about like kind of teamwork. So product manage, and for me, I can't talk about experience design and engineering without talking about product management. For me, those three things are really important. And I always say that there are no second-class citizens in any of the teams that I work with. So I couldn't leave out product management. Product management is responsible for the what. Experience design is responsible for the how, and engineering makes. My engineering aspect of this talk is a little bit light. If you're interested in having conversations with me to help me with my research, I'd really appreciate that. That's kind of one of the things that I'll be looking at next in just kind of mapping out how engineering works better in this framework. So I want to just give a few thoughts around product management because I think a lot of the things that are perceived from designers and engineers as conflict often can be either resolved or is partially caused by the behavior of product. So product is really, really important to help everyone deliver their best work. So the main thing for me is I really appreciate if product managers can support design and engineering equally. And the other thing that's really important, as we've seen, this profit and loss statement, how do we make sure we make the right things? And the onus of that usually lies on the product manager. We need to make sure that we do product discovery. And in the teams I like to work with, which is empowered teams, product and experience design usually works together to get like a better experience for everyone. So this is quite a lot, but I realized that I have a lot to say about this topic. I think I spent about 2 years where I worked in different teams to get, I actually helped design teams who were struggling to integrate into engineering. So I kind of spent a lot of time getting teams to just work better together. So my advice to both engineering and design is make sure that you're informed on strategy. What is the business trying to do? Make sure that you have access to customer research. If you don't have a researcher in your team that can share the research with you, go and find someone that can do it. Because the more we know about what our customers want, the faster it is for us to iterate through the designs and the engineering that we do to have better solutions. Make sure that you nominate a responsible tech person. So in my view, like certain people are not interested in the front end, and that's really, really perfectly okay. Just tell us if you're not interested. But we do need one person in the team to help us make sure that we make the right things when we go into that first part of the design. Make sure you have your head in the game. So when I do feedback with engineers, I really need to listen and understand how the flows work and how the technology works so that my design caters for the requirement that they have. Conversely, I need an engineer to really think through in detail what the effect is of my design. Because if you tell me that my design will work, and then when we go into sprint planning and all of a sudden, actually I worked with an amazing tech lead who was super, super, super talented. But he had this habit of telling us that things would work, and us, I mean product and design. We would have sessions with him, and when we go into sprint planning, he'd forgotten what he told us, and that was really frustrating because he used to like have to jump around too much. So really make sure you have your head in the game. Respect each other's expertise. For instance, we can't like look at your code, but from a design perspective, everyone can see the work that we do. And often when we show you stuff, we show you the solution. And it's easy to comment on a simplified solution, but getting there can be hard. So kind of just be mindful that we can't comment on the quality of your code. So also just respect our capability as well. That's actually an example I heard today about, anyway, never mind. Ask questions, don't get annoyed. So I think a lot of us, a lot of people in the craft spaces that we work are introverts. So they don't really know to say that they don't care about this part of the work because there are people involved, and that's perfectly okay. But you can just send a message, say, Jax, I don't want to be involved in this, but I'm really love the fact that we have a designer in the team. Don't be a dick. So don't just I see a lot of sniping in certain teams. So and that for me is a very negative behavior. Don't let Dunning-Kruger get you. So the less you know about a subject, the more likely you are to comment about it. And that, if when you talk to experts, they're like, no, that's not how it works. So that's one thing that we should all be very mindful of. Don't compromise. That's the story of the man who wanted to go to dinner and he wanted to wear his comfortable black shoes, but his partner wanted him to wear his dress shoes. And the compromise there is to wear one black and one brown shoe. Don't do that. So as human beings, we try and compromise. So between design and engineering, if a design doesn't work, rather say that it won't work, and then we should go and revise the design. And we can always kind of go back to the design for a future state. The thing that I was reminded again recently is conflict isn't always bad. So people kind of go, oh, there was friction, so there was a real problem in the team. But you also need to kind of look at storm, form, norm. What part of the project are you on? And if you only have designers maybe or some new capability joining, I mean ML is a new capability that a lot of teams have been kind of incorporating into their team. So when other people kind of start doing tasks that you were used to doing, you should acknowledge the fact that there's now an expert who is responsible for that piece of work. And sometimes that makes people feel uncomfortable, and that kind of manifests itself as conflict. So that's the other thing that I recommend. If you see conflict, it's not necessarily bad. The other thing about conflict is also there's creative tension. So creative tension is also an built-in thing between the craft spaces that we are working. But I think for me, the main thing is that if we work together as a team, we think about team wins instead of thinking about individual wins. And that is how I believe the best teams I've ever worked with and the teams I miss and love the most, that's what we really got right. Then the last one is very specific. Please don't write copy unless you have a degree in English. So I know that not all teams have UX writers, and I know I've had to do some UX writing recently, and it pains me because I know really good UX writers and I know my copy is not good. But if you don't have the right copy for an error message or whatever it is that you're working on at that moment in time, make sure that you ask your product person or your designer. The design team should be responsible for that because that's part of the experience, right? But that really causes a lot of problems downstream when we start sharing or when we do work. It like takes a lot of rework, and it's been something that's been really hard for me in large systems, and it's kind of it's costing me a lot of money at the moment to go back and like try and fix all of this stuff. Also, UX writing as a capability is probably one of the newest kids on the block, and a lot of people don't know what they do. And as human beings, it's so easy for us, to get into this mentality of being surrounded by similar people to us. And if you're the only people of a type in a room, if you're the only designer, if you're the only whatever, it's much harder for you to feel like your voice is heard, and the probability of you feeling a little bit more stressed out by being the only the only writer in the room is harder. So, also acknowledge that being the only person in the team is hard. So let's try and bring people in and really be accommodating, so that we can kind of work together and get better outcomes together. Practical advice, I love doing whiteboard exercises together. So when we start a new piece of work, what we do is product design and engineering work in the room together. We start talking about the task or what we think the scope should be, and we start mapping those processes out. We say, this is what the customer is doing, this is what should happen logically, functionality-wise on the screen, and this is what should be happening in the tech stack, which includes the back-end our services, because mapping our services right in the beginning means that we can map out the flows and do all the error scenarios properly, so that we write the right copy, we create all the correct assets to make it easy for us to whoop through that work and do really high quality work at the first pass. I also like doing kickoff workshops. Workshops basically also to ask people not only what this particular piece of work should be, but to get feedback on what we think as a product design and engineering community would be really good ideas for the systems that we work in. The best ideas come from the people who do the work. So I really love doing that. Design demos should really include engineering. So if you run design sprints, and you have an embedded team, try and invite an engineer, whoever is involved in the work, and if they can make it, it's great. But getting into a habit of having a demo every 2 weeks that's 20 minutes long gives visibility on what you can expect. And I personally love doing user story mapping together as a team. It's a great handover tool to understand which structure we should follow, and it also gives everyone input on what order the user story should be in. So that's me talking about making friends for money. So even if you don't care about human-centered design, even if you don't care about all those other things, but you really love designing, if you really love creating code, if you really just love the work that you do, keep in mind that we also need to keep the businesses that we love working for afloat. And in order to do that, we need to keep our customers happy. And my last screen doesn't work. That's it. Thank you, guys. I hope there was some value in there. And yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you so much, Jax. That was really, really awesome. A lot of value in it. I could relate with a lot of the stuff that you touched on. We'll just have a look at the questions for now.
Cool.
But in the meantime, while we wait for questions, cool. We've got some comments from people saying that this was really, really awesome, and they would like to share this with their teams.
Yay! That's the best outcome.
Cool. Lizette saying thank you so much for
Hey,
the talk.
Liz.
Cool.
Hey, Tom. There you are.
Very
Sorry, it's
insightful.
nice to see some friends there as well.
Yes, yes, I'm sure. It was quite an insightful talk.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. I really like the idea of having kickoff workshops. Can you touch on some of the benefits of those kickoff workshops?
For me, there are two really big things about that. The first is that, when we do product discovery, people have a tendency to want to limit the size of the audience. But in all the work that I've seen and all of the reading I've seen, including the large audience so that everyone can be part of the process is the best way of doing it. So for me, not only is it people have a tendency to dislike a design or comment on a design. But if we all worked on the design is better and we all feel that we're involved in the process. So for me, that's the biggest thing. So not only is it a huge benefit for the team, but there's huge monetary value because you don't have to bring people on board. They get it because they were there in the beginning. So 2 hours in the beginning of a project can save you many hours at the end.
Oh, very true, very true. Awesome. We've got a question from Lizette. How do you balance the need to make money with ethical design?
So I spent a lot of time in my career being. I come from a human factors background, so I'm fiercely human centered. I've spent the last 20 years of my life to argue with people to not screw over like human beings. So in the beginning, I thought it was just part of my job to do good designs. But what I ended up doing is being the voice of reason in the room often. So being the kind of person who goes that this is actually a completely unacceptable behavior from the business and escalating it to the right level to make sure that whatever idea is pitched that is unethical doesn't go ahead. I think for me, Liz, there's also a much deeper conversation there. So the one is, how do you make sure that the work that you do is generally roughly ethical? That's one thing. The second thing is something else I've been spending a lot of time trying to think about is like systemically, we live in a world that currently promotes large businesses. So we live in a system that promotes money over ethics. So how do we as a design community start using our skills to get out of that system's trap? But you and I can talk about that separately because we'll geek out about it.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. Any other questions? I don't think there are any other questions. Cool. I think we can wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining.
Go do awesome things, guys. Go make awesome, beautiful, usable things together. That's my last comment.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cool.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was an awesome talk.
Thank you. Take care.